magni for speed, distance, or agility in the air. If there was a machine to challenge her in any contest, she had yet to find it, though the Collegium artificers were constantly nipping at her heels to provide one. The thought still caught in her like a hook, recalling her poor, faithful Valenti's brutal fate. It had been during the retaking of Solarno, her band of mercenaries and air pirates against the Empire's new-fledged air force. She had duelled their best pilot. Dragon fighting, they called it around the Excelsior, after the fierce aerial battles the Dragonfly Kingdom loved. He had been very good, and although she would not acknowledge him as her better, he had met her time and again, even though his black and yellow striped spear flight had not been equal to her Valenti. And at the last, with her machine torn and mauled and its rotary piercers jammed, she had taken advantage of his fixation on her and baited him in too close, leaping from the cockpit before their two flyers crashed and tangled, removing herself from the fight. She had watched, her own wings a blur, as the conjoined machines tumbled and fell, and felt as though she had killed her best friend. The Esca Magni was some consolation after that. The original design had sprung from the best of Collegium artifice and her own unparalleled understanding of the simple business of flying, and never had there been a more demanding mistress for the artificers than Tiscola Tachiamre, known as Tacky to her friends. Even a month ago, she had still been making minute changes to perfect the new flyer's handling. The Esca Magni, as originally built, had surpassed the Valenti by a small but measurable degree, and there had been a great deal of measuring, for the Collegium beetles were fond of that. Then had come the new clockwork, or the new clockwork, to reflect the reverent way that the artificers talked about it. It involved some mad innovation in metallurgy from somewhere across the sea, some Spiderland's place or other, and it was not exactly common, but there was a steady supply of the improved spring steel seeping into Collegium. An artificer called Gaynor had begun using it for some boat he was working on, and shortly afterwards one of Tacky's mechanic disciples had brought it to her attention. The level of precision required to take full advantage of the new clockwork was formidable, but at around the same time, and apparently from the same source, Collegium began to see machine parts crafted to a frightening exactness, perfect in every tooth, no matter how small. The resulting engines were lighter, smaller, and considerably more powerful than anything anyone had seen before, and Tacky had kicked an awful lot of shins in the college and got up the noses of a great many ground-bound beetlekinden before she secured a supply for the flying machines. Thankfully, by then, she had her supporters, her students, and a rag-bag of collegiates who shared her passion for the air. She had run the Esca Magni through a lot of paces since then, distance trips and mock duels, up and down the coast, hops over to Sarn and Princep, even back to her old home of Solarno to show off to those of her friends that were still among the living. This journey was different, though. She had thought to make it in one long leg, gliding where she could, hitching a ride in the high air currents and testing the new clockwork to its logical conclusion. She had made good progress at first, but eventually minute changes in the engine's ticking and a sluggishness in the controls had convinced her that reality was going to fall considerably short of her ambitions, and that was without any hard weather or, most demanding of all, actual air combat. She resolved to try and kick her tame artificers into working on something even better. She put down in Heleron, and paid for the use of a winding engine to retension her flyer. She felt bitterly disappointed about having to break her journey, for all that it gave her a chance to eat something that hadn't been dried half to death. Tacky was the first recorded pilot ever to make the trip from Collegium to Heleron in a single journey in a heavier-than-air machine, but she had failed in her original plan, therefore it still seemed like